Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, SAMHSA Service Members, Veterans, and Their Families Technical Assistance Center presents Resources, Innovations, and Partnerships, Supporting the Wellness of Military Children and Their Families, sponsored by SAMHSA Service Members, Veterans, and Their Families Technical Assistance Center. My name is Linda Henderson-Smith, and I am the Director of Children and Trauma-Informed Services for the National Council for Behavioral Health, and I will serve as your moderator this afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to draw your attention to some important webinar logistics. During today's presentation, your slides will be automatically synchronized with the audio, so you will not need to flip any slides to follow along. You will listen to audio through your computer speakers, so please ensure they are on and the volume is up. You may send us questions at any time during the webinar by typing your question into the Ask a Question box in the lower left portion of your player. Depending on the question, we may type an answer back to you or save it for the end. We'll answer as many of your questions as time allows. This webinar is being recorded, and an audio version of the entire webinar, as well as a PDF of the presentation slides, will be available on the Webinar Archives page of the National Council website within 48 hours of the broadcast. Following the webinar, we invite you to please complete a short survey. Finally, if you need technical assistance, please click on the question mark button in the upper right corner of your player to see a list of frequently asked questions and contact info for tech support if needed. I'll now pass things off to Cicely Burrows-McElwain.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. We're so excited for you to join us today. This is going to be an amazing webinar that allows us to explore a little bit about our wonderful military and veteran families and allows us to learn from some of the experts in the field about some great resources and innovations. Can we go to the next slide, please? Since 2008, SAMHSA has really partnered with our states and territories to work on strengthening our behavioral health systems and serving service members, veterans, and their families, who we affectionately call SMVF, through our Technical Assistance Center. I want to take just a few moments to first of all welcome everyone to the call, but also to explain a little bit about the background of our Technical Assistance Center and to share with everybody a little bit about the work that we do each day here at SAMHSA. Our efforts really started back in 2008 to provide this information around strategic planning for states and territories. This effort has really grown because now, as you can see on a map that we're going to share with you in just a few moments, we've engaged with all 50 states now across the country to make sure that our nation's behavioral health systems are effective and efficient for serving this population. And we're really excited to provide webinars like the one that you're on today to help further explain the great resources that our nation has and to bring together partners like those from the National Child Traumatic Stress Initiative that you'll hear from today, as well as Sesame to talk about their efforts to serve these families as well. As you know, or you may not know, SAMHSA is really the national federal agency that works to lead our efforts to ensure that substance use and mental health issues among all Americans, including our service members, veterans, and their families, are well understood, and that resources and treatment are innovative and effective. Next slide, please. The TA Center is one that has been founded for some time and continues to provide some really great facilitation, but to forward-facing audiences does wonderful resources like our webinar today, in addition to some of the great resources that they've done for other groups that are kind of more individualized. So states and territories each have teams of really dedicated stakeholders like many of you that are on the call today. And their efforts are to work to coordinate between all systems, military and civilian alike, around behavioral health and making sure that services are seamless when families choose to go to one or the other system for care. We know that it's really critical that we share this information and provide information about what works, and so we learn from one another. Our efforts here at SAMHSA that we continue to show through the TA Center are issues around transitioning out of military service into veteran and civilian life, as well as looking at what we can do to strengthen and coordinate efforts between VA healthcare systems and community healthcare systems. And those resources and information that we glean from the work that we do at the federal level are shared to the states and territories through the TA Center itself. They also work really well in helping promote the work of the SAMHSA's Behavioral Health Workforce Initiative to build workforce capacity and identify some issues around the need for behavioral health providers across our nation, which we know we have so many shortages. And so in particular, to bring about cultural competency around military and veteran families for this population. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, the Policy Academies is one of the ways that our TA Center provides this support and technical assistance, and have now just recently engaged with all 50 states and the territories. These started way back in 2008 and have continued to grow through what we called implementation academies, where we took teams that had created really solid strategic plans and moved them into an area where they were starting to focus their efforts on specific initiatives. Some of those might have been focused around reducing suicides or increasing services for military and veteran families, like the resources that we're going to be speaking to today. The implementation academies just recently wrapped up with what we called leadership academies, where we engaged with dozens of states across the nation to work with their governors on down to make sure that all of the key leadership within their states and territories were talking to one another about how they continued to do the work. So many years after these initial engagements that have taken so many of our service members to multiple deployments and have impacted so many of our families, so many years later, we're continuing to identify what some of the needs and the gaps are in these treatments. And so we're so excited to be able to share with everyone today that this work continues to be a priority for SAMHSA, and that the states and territories continue to come to us and look for resources and suggestions, and also share within themselves some of the resources that they're doing and some of the best practice models that are out there. So this TA Center, through the information that you'll learn today, is a great resource, and we hope that you'll keep coming back to listen to more and more of what we have to offer for you. Today I'd like to share a little bit too about some of the other efforts outside of the TA Center work that SAMHSA is doing, focusing on military and veteran families. So let's go to the next slide and just talk a little bit about that. And I think I just gave a great overview of what the TA Center does, so we're going to jump on to the next one. Thanks. So today's webinar in particular, we're going to go over kind of what you're going to glean from that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what SAMHSA has been doing. And then additional to that, I wanted to make sure that you have opportunity to know that, again, as they had mentioned earlier, we'll have question and answers. So there's a question and answer box that we hope folks, as you come up with ideas or thoughts, that you'll be chatting and putting those into the box. We'll be working to get everybody responses as soon as we can. But in particular, what you're going to be focused on today with us is looking at gaps and needs for military and veteran families, understanding what tools, resources, tips, and activities there are to address those needs, and some of the access for linkages across cross-system collaboration. Our TA Center's done a great job of identifying the fact that there's no lack of dedication and desire from our states and communities to make sure that we provide our service members and their families the best care possible. But oftentimes what is lacking or could be strengthened is that collaboration amongst systems, and so we really want to talk about that as well. Strategies that also are responsive to the unique demands of military families in particular, and I'm really excited to share that we have a number of folks that will be talking about our communities that actually have been very successful in identifying what some of those gaps are. And so there's adaptations to certain treatments and things like that that we found have been really effective in that way. So those are our overview for the webinar, and let's talk a little bit about the objectives. Next slide. Hoping that you'll walk away today with understanding those unique strengths and the needs of our military and veteran children, reviewing what the research is telling us behind the resources and partnerships that have already been developed, And then we're going to be exploring some of the latest products and resources developed by Cookie Monster, by Sesame Workshop, and examine strategies and engage supporting military and veteran families, what works and what's out there. And we're hoping that what we've found and pulled together in the slides for you today will be something that you actually are able to take and move forward with and kind of explore yourself as you get to dive into some of these resources. So I had mentioned before some of the recent information that's been coming out from SAMHSA to some of our colleagues, and they thought it might be a really good time for us to share a little bit about that on this webinar, because one thing that we've been doing here at the organization is to make sure that military and veteran families are actually embedded as a population of focus. And that population needs to be dealt with in a way that we are paying special attention to some of the unique behavioral health challenges that they may be facing. So if we go to the next slide, I'd like to explain to you just a tiny bit about the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, which is a report that we actually have had for decades now here at SAMHSA, but one that just in the last few years has started to take a look at specific data focused on military and veteran families, and one that just had some very interesting data come out this month specific to military wives and military children. Those connections are identified when someone volunteers to do the survey, and they actually work to identify both substance use or misuse as well as behavioral health issues or treatment. And those in particular are the two areas that I wanted to make sure that folks knew had just come out. They differentiate within the NSTA survey, what we call that for short, between U.S. military populations and non-veterans. And we are looking again at just trying to share this preliminary data. We know there's not very many years to give you a whole lot of trends, but we were so excited to be able to share for the first time that they were able to do some data mining and take a look specifically at military wives. We did not have a large enough sample size to take a look at military male spouses at this time. So let's take a look at the first slide. Again, if we switch over to slide 10, or 11, sorry. These are the headings that you'll be able to find through the NSTA data review, and we have links for these provided at the end of the webinar that folks can take a look at. And slide 12 is taking a look at the past year illicit drug use among wives of military personnel. And again, this is a self-report, and these are married women aged 18 to 49. What they found was that there's a difference between the utilization, hardly any difference between the utilization of illicit drugs, actually just slightly less for military wives, military personnel, wives of military personnel, a significant difference in the use of marijuana, and a little bit higher use in the misuse of psychotropic drugs. And so one thing that we noticed, and and this kind of trends also the actual military service members as well, is that illicit drug use is something that's less likely to be an issue for our military families. If we go to the next slide, please. And then the same for illicit drug use among military personnel. This is children of military personnel ages 12 to 17. There were no statistical differences between the use that was reported, and what we were just starting to look at was the fact that we did have a rather small sample size for this population, but continue to be something that we're kind of now tracking to get baseline data on. So you can again see there the same categories were asked of the kids from ages 12 to 17, again around illicit drug use, the marijuana, and misuse of psychotropic drugs. So if you compare those two samples and they adjusted those, again, at this time they were reporting just that there was, at this time, not a significant difference between civilian children and children of military personnel. But if we go to the next slide, where we're going to be looking at report of any mental illness in the past year, and report of, this is a self-report among the wives of military personnel, where we did actually see some significant differences for the report of any mental illness being present, and also whether or not they were receiving mental health services. So we know that if there's an active duty family or even a family in reserves, they're more likely to have access to health care through TRICARE or through other means. And what we're seeing is that those individuals may have more likelihood to self-report that mental illness, and this is not just depression. Depression actually specifically was one that didn't have any differences between civilian and military-wide populations, but all other reported mental illnesses were a little bit higher, the 29.1% compared to the 19.7% of the civilian population, and then just slightly higher utilization of mental health services as well. And so, you know, at this time when we sit down with our experts and we kind of look at why that might be, we want folks to understand that, you know, there's a lot of speculation on that, and the data just coming out now, we're not exactly sure. But one thing for sure that's important is that we're recognizing that in a culture where many people aren't accessing care, the fact that these wives are accessing care a little bit more than their civilian counterparts is encouraging. Next slide, please. So while we are just in our beginning stages of looking at NSDA and other resources to make sure that we're addressing and kind of tracking around the utilization and need for services for this population, one thing that's critical is we're understanding that the research that's being provided is really critical to making sure that we are not missing some big red flags when it comes to our population. Having not seen a whole lot of differences between the military children and the civilian children as it relates to the NSDA data, that's one thing that we're going to continue to kind of try to get a baseline on further. And moving forward, we hope to share this report on an annual basis with folks as the NSDA is done annually. For the military wives, you might have seen that this data, having just been released, had quite a few articles and resources come out through Military Times and other resource and reference materials and editorials. One thing we want is folks to start talking about the need for us to make sure that behavioral health services are understood and that there's the misconception around accessing care is something that's decreasing for our families. And so this is really critical. One thing that I hope that folks understand as well is that these changing attitudes are something that is real mission for us here at SAMHSA, and making sure that what many refer to as stigma is something that's still around today, but the effort to make sure that we're focusing on prevention of behavioral health conditions and the resiliency for those that are in recovery is a critical component that everybody has a role to play in. To talk a little bit more about these specific resources and some of the unique challenges and trends, and also the unique resiliencies that our families come in to the world with when they are military and veteran family identified, is a great friend of ours. So let's go to the next slide and I'll give a quick introduction there. Dr. Gregory Luskin is someone who I have had the honor of working with for several years now since I came to SAMHSA from the VA. And Dr. Luskin serves as the Director for Military and Veteran Families Programming at the UCLA and Duke National Center for Child Traumatic Stress. The National Center is a SAMHSA grant-funded cooperative agreement that has done amazing work all around helping children and families that have experienced trauma, and his work in particular to serve military and veteran families is something that many of you may have already learned about in previous webinars or resources. He is truly an amazing colleague and friend, and so I want to hand over to Dr. Luskin to talk to you a little bit about our military and veterans family program there and what they've learned in working with our families across the country. Greg?
Thank you, Cicely. And next slide, please. The title of my talk is Engaging Resources for Military and Veteran Families and Their Children, Review of Selected Products. Today I'll be discussing the development of highly relevant and engaging materials with the goal to share an understanding related to the experiences, expectations, and needs of military and veteran families and their children. Next slide, please. I'll be focusing firstly on our organization, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, or the NCTSN. And through this, I'll be establishing what we'll refer to as a trauma-informed lens. And through my talk, I'll be balancing both a trauma-informed lens with a military-informed approach. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network was established by Congress in 2000. And our goal is to raise the standard of care to improve access to services for traumatized children, their families, and communities. The NCTSN serves as a resource for developing and disseminating evidence-based interventions, trauma-informed services, and public and professional education. Next slide. As you can see from this slide, our organization, the NCTSN, works across service systems to be able to reach children and their families and communities across service systems, including military and veteran families, child welfare, juvenile justice, schools, and medical settings. And you can learn more about the NCTSN through our website at nctsn.org. Next slide, please. Why are we discussing military and veteran families and their children? It's an important question that we need to ask ourselves. First of all, today's all-volunteer military has large numbers of married service members and service members with children. And this is true across all branches, as well as the reserve component and Guard. We have a responsibility for the physical and psychological health care of our service members, their families, and their children. Service members, spouse, children can all share a strong identification as a military family. And in a sense, the military family, the military children growing up in the military and who transition into veteran life, all carry with them elements of the values, their experiences from deployment, moves, transitions, also the amazing sense of pride, contribution, sacrifice that comes along with being in a military family. The family shares that service member with the military, so there is a sense that even belonging to the military family shares their service member with the military. So there is a sense of sharing that service member with the military family. Next, please. There are roles and responsibilities can shift rapidly as a result of military life and deployment. Families may contend with separation from parent and partner, both physically and psychologically. The family's resilience can support the service member's resilience and vice versa. And family life can change and transition to civilian life. And we know that our understanding of the military family shifts too as that family transitions into civilian life and into a veteran status. Next slide, please. What have we learned about military families? We've learned that there are core values of the military that also help define the military family's sense of self-identity. These include a sense of honor, courage, loyalty, integrity, and commitment. That there is a tremendous sense of service orientation by the family that's shared with the service member. And there's tremendous grit, determination, and perseverance by the family to adapt to the many challenges that come along with military life. We understand that there are unique demands of military life, including separations, moves, for the children, new schools, new peers, new social life. That with military life can include deployments and family separations from loved ones and the return of family and the struggles that sometimes can ensue with reintegration. We know that there's needs for adjustment. Really, military families, military children may define themselves by their ability to adapt. And we know that this adaptation can continue as the family transitions to veteran and civilian life. Next slide, please. We understand that military families may live under the dangers of war. And with those dangers come vulnerabilities. That the impact and consequences may extend to the service member as well as their spouses, the children, and the extended families. And we've seen now, through our studies in the last 10, 15 years, that there can even be long-term impact for families and children. That sometimes these vulnerabilities can become risks for the family's mental health. We understand better today about the potential for intergenerational transmission of trauma. That is the impact of parental psychological injury or physical injury impacting the mental health of the family and the children. We've seen the impact, too, when family violence occurs or child maltreatment occurs. We know that being part of combat can lead to post-traumatic stress and its long-term impact. And also, as Cicely was just referring, there's reports even of substance abuse among service members and also spouses and the children. So we're very mindful of the potential for these risk factors to occur in some of our military families, some of our veteran families and their children. Next slide, please. How do we address these issues? How do we continue to support the public health, the well-being, the psychological resiliency, the continued adaptation of families who we know bring to the military and continue to show great, tremendous growth, grit, determination, adaptability, and at the same time do face those unique stressors, those unique challenges. Multiple frameworks have been put forward to understand growing up in the military and adapting to those challenges and ways to maintain the well-being of these families through these types of potential risk situations. So we'll talk about some of these frameworks now. The first is the ecological approach. The ecology includes all of the interdependent systems from the Bronfenbrenner approach, the micro and macro systems that surround the child and the family and the community that may shape and impact that family through their military experience and their military life. Another framework is developmental, and that is the child may be born into and raised and grow up in the military across these ecologies. So how do we support the development of these children? How do we help create a positive social environment for these children to grow up in the military and beyond in their veteran life? Next slide. Resiliency. Military families share an interest to maintain successful adaptations in contexts of challenging and sometimes traumatic circumstances. We believe that military families identify strongly with us from a position of strength, from a position of pride, and we go to great lengths to understand ways that we can support the continuation of a strength-based approach, a well-being, help the well-being of the families and children. So being able to assist the continuation of resiliency for these families has been and remains a major goal for programs developed to support these families. Next are the adjustments. And as I've been saying, military families and children are often challenged to adapt and need to adjust to novel, challenging, sometimes traumatic situations. And the research suggests that things like deployment, even the length of deployment, or parental distress, including the caregiver, the at-home caregiver distress, or the parental mental health, may impact, even negatively impact child mental health. So understanding how these factors occur can help us to identify and target treatments to support the parent-child relationship, the mental health of the parent, the return of the parent into the family, and be able to address any traumatic responses by the children themselves. Next slide, please. This is a slide that shows and demonstrates the ecologies that may surround the child. So in the center are the children, the youth, and we can tell from this slide just all the various contexts in which the child may be embedded, influenced. And it includes the parents, the teachers, the service providers, the community members, and even beyond, the policies, the larger agencies that may shift and form and create the experiences for the children in these across these different contexts. And it's so important for us to remember how these children might be impacted by these various experiences. Next slide, please. Developmental challenges may exist, and through the NCTSN and other like-minded organizations, we try to understand there are great diversity, and one of the areas of diversity is in development, that being able to understand the needs of parents, to understand development, and providers to understand development, and that development for an infant who experiences separation or a toddler, that their responses may be developmentally appropriate, but also that the stress on the family system may result in increases in child behavioral issues, both externalizing behaviors, those that we witness and see, as well as the internalizing behaviors that the child may feel, including sadness or loneliness, a sense of abandonment. So we're very mindful of being able to think developmentally. Next slide, please. And think about how the cognitive, emotional, social development of the child and the youth across these developmental epochs requires us to be sensitive to how that child may be thinking about, processing, dealing and coping within their own family, with their peer groups, how they're thinking about, for example, a parent deployed, the separation, how they're thinking about the parent at home and their responsibilities, how the child too needs to adjust their own roles and responsibilities in the family, and at times continue to adapt and readjust within the family, as well as moves and transition, as well as the potential for transitioning back to civilian life. Next slide, please. And more, we're understanding that teenagers, too, may struggle, and there's been some recent research to suggest that adolescents from military families may experience, too, those challenges associated with military life, and military children in both civilian settings, for example, civilian schools, as well as military settings, may be challenged by these needs to adjust and adapt and change. So we're very mindful across these developmental epochs of what each of these areas may bring, both developmentally and in terms of relationships with the parent and family. Next, please. As I've noted, transitions are an important element to military life, that they include change in station, movements around the country, around the world, changes in social life. Families often consider this maybe a benefit of being a military family. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Many military families might report these are some of the greatest experiences that they've ever experienced, is being able to live in different cultures, see things that most of us would never even imagine seeing. but there's also the potential for interruption or disruption in terms of social life, academic disruption, and a continuity in interests and activities. Next, please. Many military families have endured repeated and extended deployments for service members to Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of these children have grown up in the military and have only known life through deployment and development through deployment. That is, parents leaving to go into dangerous conditions, overseas deployment, and returning. And as we see more and more drawdown in terms of some of these combat deployments and more transition to civilian life, we're aware that this comes with the potential for even loss, a loss of that military structure, a loss of the potential for economic security of being in the military, the loss of housing and other benefits, the loss of even identity of being a military family, and what that might also challenge our military veteran families to adapt to. Next, please. I found this to be a very interesting graphic from the Blue Star Family 2014 family survey when asked about the top 5 both positive and negative impacts of deployment on children. This gives a really nice summary that there are the positives but also the challenges and negatives. And the positives include the adaptability and the learning to adapt across situations and challenges, the sense of increased independence, the personal growth that can come with military life, the increased resilience, and the sense of pride. And at the same time, there's the challenges, the negatives: separation anxiety, worry, irritability, difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating, all the things that may come along with some of these unique stressors and challenges. Next, please. In order to understand military families, we've also been able to work with military across different branches, Guard and Reserve, work both in the military and the community, help create community capacity to serve military, and through doing so, we've developed resources and materials in order to create a collaborative, innovative approach to engaging and serving our military families. Next, please. And much of our materials are available through the NCTSN Military and Family Learning Center, again at nctsn.org. Next, please. And I'm just going to breeze through some of our professional resources that are available to you. On the right here, you see Working Effectively with Military Families, 10 Key Concepts. This really lays out some of those key frames, the key lenses in order to engage and provide highly relevant education and treatment or interventions to support the needs of military families and children. Next, please. Also on the right is After Service, Veteran Families in Transition. That really spells out some of the key issues that veteran families and their children may face as they're transitioning into civilian life, back to civilian schools, for example, for some of them, and being able to support the long-term social and emotional needs of the families. Also for those families that may experience family violence, we've included child maltreatment in military families. Next, please. And also our materials include traumatic grief in military children for those families that have experienced the loss or death of a loved one due to military circumstances or after due to other kinds of life experiences that may result in the loss of a loved one. Next, please. So my time is limited, so I will just kind of breeze through some of the remaining slides. These are the key learning objectives through the development of our materials. They are to really assist our families and youth to maintain well-being, to address and overcome stigma, and help the families create accurate expectations around assessing treatment. Next, please. Our goal is to destigmatize efforts to create family programs in family-friendly settings and to focus on the strengths of service member, veteran, and family, and really to practice a flexibility in our approach to help the adaptability of our families. Next, please. And these are some of the key elements that we have found to being able to engage and create military-friendly, military-relevant materials. Next, please. Engagement, we believe, is a process of being able to create materials, adapt treatments, create treatments that are seen as a good fit to the worldview of military and veteran families. So a number of our materials are geared towards helping providers to be able to engage through this kind of training. Next, please. We believe that engagement includes addressing perceived barriers, including need for an expectation of therapy or counseling and a belief in the therapeutic process, and identifying issues of self-care both for provider and the service member and their family. Next, please. Many of you are aware that the issue of trauma runs throughout our work, and we understand that there is a potential relationship between trauma and its impact, its negative potential for negative impact on the psyche, the body, the spirit, and the functioning, the overall functioning of both adult and child. And so without getting too far into it, we do want to focus you on the materials that we have available to be able to bring a trauma-informed approach to your work if and when that need is necessary. Next, please. That there are treatments that are available for military families, that there are materials that are geared toward the military family well-being, self-care, the resilience, the maintenance of the resiliency, that our work includes the ongoing encouragement about the strengths and recovery and the ability to recover as necessary and to maintain and achieve well-being across our military and veteran families. Next, please. The NCTSN has, as a national network, developed and adapted multiple interventions in partnerships with many of the leading academic sites throughout our country to bring to the military and make available these different kinds of evidence-based treatments. So here's a brief list, I think, of some of the key treatment types that we'd encourage you to make yourself familiar with. And I know I've gone over my time, so I'm going to end here and hand things over to our Sesame colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Greg. This is Cicely again. I just wanted to share what a pleasure it was to give that or to hear that overview. And I think truly what every time we get to hear a little bit about what the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has learned about working with military and veteran families is that it requires a special effort on the part of the providers that are providing these services and these systems and building them. And it also requires a special advocacy within the military and veteran family themselves to be willing to share when folks aren't understanding where they're coming from or understanding what might be able to be something that they could get to accommodate some of the unique challenges they face. So thank you so much for that. I just want to provide really quick, brief introductions for two amazing folks that really don't need me to vouch for them because, as you can see in their biopics, they have some pretty stellar folks that provide them support there at Sesame Street. So Sabrina Huda and Tara Wright, as you can see on this screen today, are joining us from Sesame Workshop, and they both have done amazing projects all over the world to support the development of children and families, in particular their both specializing right now in looking at military and veteran families products and resources. And so I'm going to hand it over to them to talk to you about some amazing products and resources that are out there, and can say firsthand from the work that I've done with my veterans in the communities with some of the very early products that these work. They're so engaging and so wonderful. So Sabrina, Tara, over to you.
Thanks, Cicely. Thank you so much for that kind introduction and for having us here. Good afternoon, everyone. We're so happy you could join us. Oh, thanks for the slide switch. So my colleague Tara and I were really fortunate to work for the U.S. Social Impact Team here at Sesame Workshop. And many people don't know this, but Sesame doesn't just produce a children's TV show. We do a whole lot more. We have the pleasure of working with some amazing folks to create bilingual multimedia resources to help kids, families, and the providers who work with them. And in our work, we also recognize the need for these first-rate media-based resources to support all of our military and veteran families. Next, please. And when we say media-based, what do we mean? Well, it's basically our tools are available in a variety of channels so that families that need it the most can find them, and the providers who work with them, such as primary care physicians, educators, and social workers, can easily access them also. We have them available on our websites, through email campaigns, and as also free apps to download. And furthermore, we really try to stay active on social media via Facebook and Twitter to create awareness about these resources and also engage with our military families. And finally, we still have our printed toolkits and activity books because we know the importance of having these tangible pieces for kids and adults alike. Next, please. So to speak a little bit more about the actual resources we have, for over a decade now, Sesame Workshop has been supporting military families for all the different milestones in their life. We first created tools in 2006 to help families cope with the challenges of deployment, to help build resilience in times of separation and change. And then the overwhelming response to this program really revealed a need for additional resources around other topics such as homecomings, relocation, injury, and grief. And most recently, earlier this year, we created new tools for both transitioning and veteran families, which we're going to talk about in more detail. Next, please. And as in all of our work, our resources are research-based. In our decade of learnings and listening, we talked to the families and the experts. How could Sesame help? We were always asked for strategies to address the extraordinary challenges that are really unique to our military and veteran families. So regardless of the challenges a military family was going through, whether it be a deployment or a relocation or something else, all of these families felt stress and anxiety in their everyday. They asked Sesame to help them with simple messaging and easy-to-use resources that could really help the family come together to talk, listen, and connect through open forms of communication. Really address those frameworks around resiliency and adjustment that Dr. Laskin was talking about. So over and over again, families told us they needed some help to maintain these everyday routines for their kids and to help them adapt to the new normal in their lives. Next, please. So these were the strategies that we applied when we created tools for our Sesame Street for Military Families Transitions Initiative, specifically targeting our veteran families as they reintegrate into civilian life. Next, please. Our main takeaway from this initiative was that when a service member transitions, the entire family is transitioning. And with these resources, we really wanted to do three things. Provide the tools to help families cope with the changes with an optimistic point of view, increase parents' abilities to communicate about the changes in developmentally appropriate ways with their kids, and also create awareness among providers the importance of including the entire family, particularly the children, when addressing veteran issues. Next, please. And formative research really helped us assess what these resources should look like and focus on. We were asked to be cognizant that families had different attitudes towards their service. They were experiencing various circumstances around their transition, leaving the military, and were also adjusting to the new normal in very different ways. And for these reasons, we wanted the content to be simple and clear and focus on the positive aspects of all change and really convey a sense of optimism. So overall, the approach to the change was that it was a new adventure for the children and the whole family. Next, please. And with that in mind, the materials we developed were all centered around the theme of adventure. There are 10 new videos, including an adventure music video, animation, and interviews with kids and families talking about their transitions in a fun and light way, so as they're talking about moving or making new friends or really understanding the importance of community. The activity book we developed is available both digitally and in print, and is filled with interactive pages to get kids and parents engaged in conversation. Tara's going to tell you more about that. And then the Adventure Campaign is a unique opportunity for parents and providers to sign up to receive a biweekly newsletter for 12 weeks directly to their email. So each newsletter covers a theme on transitions, and what's so great here is that parents are receiving these tools in manageable bursts rather than getting information overload all at once. I'm going to turn it over to Tara now to really talk a little bit more about the strategies and messaging behind all the content we created.
Thanks, Sabrina, and we can move to the next slide, please. So as Sabrina said, she gave you a great overview of the background for specifically our transitions materials and gave you a great overview of the types of resources we created for our military families. And now I'd like to walk you through some of the key strategies that we wanted to communicate to these families. And these strategies really speak to what Dr. Luskin presented. You'll notice that most of these are what we like to call resilience factors, which when practiced and perfected can help both children and adults gain confidence and remain confident through challenging situations like the transition into civilian life. We've paired each factor with a specific type of media, and we were really intentional about this. And we wanted to serve the content to make sure that each strategy was communicated in a memorable and engaging way. So really the goal here is, as we go through these slides and these factors, I really hope that you'll be inspired to adapt these resources into your own work with families. So please put your brainstorming hats on as we go through these factors. So let's start with positive outlook. As Sabrina said, we wanted to really encapsulate this idea of optimism. And positivity is really the crux of the Transitions Initiative. We wanted to help reframe the act of moving or any type of change into a story of adventure that's specific and unique to each child. So when you go to the sesamestreet.org/veterans website, you'll be greeted by a music video of the adventure song, which is really adorable. I highly recommend going and taking a look at it. It puts a positive spin on moving and making new friends. It's very catchy. So singing along can be a great way to reinforce the idea that change can be fun. Additionally, the My Story, My Big Adventure book that she also mentioned is really a keepsake activity book. It encapsulates a variety of activities that really reiterate all the resilience factors we'll talk about today. The book is also great because grown-ups and kids can do the activities together, and the book itself can serve as a comfort item for kids. Next, please. All right, next is self-appreciation. So inside the activity book and also on the website as an individual PDF activity, you'll find activities that communicate a sense of self-appreciation through identifying strengths. This is another thing that Dr. Laskin touched on. The idea is that when children are able to recognize, name, and affirm their particular strengths, they are able to adopt an I can do it attitude. So in times of frustration, they can draw on their strengths and be more willing to try again. And it really leads to this idea of resilience and just getting back in there and trying again. Next, please. All right, so this next one is circle of care. And the importance of this factor was really emphasized to us by our advisors and experts. They noticed that when families transition, adults often overlook that the stress and uncertainty also really affects their children. So we wanted to encourage parents and caregivers to remind their children often that they are in this together and that they have people around them who love them. So on the website, there are some really wonderful videos, and they feature stories from real parents who have been through the transition process, and they really give testimonials that can be helpful to the parents that you are working with. They give a level of comfort knowing that their peers have gone through a similar situation, and they really give simple ideas for ways that families can strengthen and bond together during a time of change. Next. All right, this fourth one is feelings and emotions. It is so important, and I'm sure you all know this, to help children label, recognize, and express their emotions. Sometimes kids have big feelings and lots of feelings, and parents really can reiterate and reassure their kids that it's okay to have lots of feelings and big feelings. And parents can articulate that they even have big feelings and really give a sense of comfort. We also have an activity page that's called Feeling Faces that really helps identify what types of emotions a child may be feeling, but it gets beyond that and asks the kid to get to the root of why they're feeling that way and encourages parents to talk with them and communicate and work together to help them feel better or feel more happy. Next, please. Okay, so this one is fun. So this is all about positive problem solving, and this is crucial for learning skills and gaining confidence in daily situations. But problem solving is hard, and sometimes it's hard to stay calm when things are so different and changing all the time. So Sesame has created the Breathe, Think, Do app, which is available for free on iPhone and Google Play. And this really provides a strategy for problem solving in situations big and small. And it's really useful for adults as well. In fact, Sabrina and I were using this strategy before to get some nerves out before we spoke with you all. So I do encourage you to use it in your everyday life. And because I know the holidays are around the corner, I thought I would actually walk everyone through the strategy. So let's move on to the next slide, and I'll walk you through this if everyone can just take 3 deep breaths. So we're going to breathe in and out, in and out. And then one more. Take a deep breath in and out. I hope you're feeling better, probably a little more calm, a little more serene. And so really as you go through the app, you're encouraged to take 3 deep breaths while thinking about your emotional state. And this goes back to the feeling faces, really naming the emotion that you're feeling, putting a name to it. And then next, you'll think about what is the problem? Why am I feeling this way? And also, what are the plans? How can I address this emotion? How can I change? And then the next step, the last step, is the do. So you'll decide which plan you're going to move forward with and how many times you're going to try. That's a really important one. So you can set goals for yourself. And then decide at what point you'll try a different plan if the one you chose isn't quite working. So the Breathe, Think, Do method really encapsulates all the other resilience factors and strategies we've been introduced to so far. And it can be really useful and an effective tool, especially if you have a limited time to work with them, because it really encapsulates all these other factors. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this next one is keeping routines. And Dr. Laskin really touched on this, and I think what he said was really great. So many things change. Even if a family stays in the same location, their school can change, their income level, their jobs, just their everyday routines can really change. And so it's really important to give children a sense of control and normalcy in the midst of change. And parents and caregivers can remind kids that not everything changes. They can also establish new routines like ice cream dates or books at bedtime that really give kids something to look forward to, and even parents. I think parents often forget that their routines are important. And so setting time aside, especially with their kids, is really helpful to maintaining a calm sense of confidence throughout this transition. All right, next, please. Okay, this one's tricky. Being honest is often tough for parents because they themselves have a hard time confronting even the thought of some situation coming to pass or having a tough conversation, it can be really overwhelming. So we really wanted to give parents some talking points for things that may happen or questions that might come up that they just don't know how to answer. And the parent tips provide examples of these conversations, but they also provide a model for topics that we don't necessarily cover. And as a provider, this is where you can really come in. You can go through these questions and examples with parents and break them down and say, maybe why did this certain response work? And how can you employ the same type of elements into a response that your child asks? You can really help parents figure out the balance of information, when to share, how much to share, and really strike that delicate balance when hard situations and hard conversations come up. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this one is called Focusing on Friendship. And like I said, even if you stay in the same place, military families are often moving away and friendships change so often. Transitioning to civilian life leads to lots of differences, maybe a different school or income level, schedule, all of those things. So adults can really help children feel confident making new friends and keeping in touch with old friends. We have these really cute videos on the website that actually have kids, military kids who have gone through transition, and they tell the sweetest stories about how they've stayed in touch with friends. And so showing these to kids can be really helpful to let them know they're not alone, that others have gone through this. And of course, it always helps to have Elmo as a friend. So we love that Elmo's on this website, that they can rely on his furry, cuddly lovingness. All right, next slide. Okay, so reaching out for help. Again, just like in being honest, reaching out for help is very adult-focused. When adults transition, they may feel a sense of loss of community, and they're losing the structure and the reliability and the centralization of military life, and they can also, at the same time, experience information overload. So it's hard to know who to ask or where to ask or even to remember to ask for help and for advice. And so as a provider, it's always really helpful to just be a gentle nudge to these parents to let them know that they can ask for help and they can ask for advice. And we have some great videos on our site that have parents talking about how they made the change, what steps they took to get plugged in to their non-military communities. And so these are really good peer examples of how to demonstrate to families that they can stay in touch and they can ask for help. Okay, next one. All right, and continuing service. So Dr. Laskin also talked about this. These families really share in the service of the military member. The kids really take a lot of pride and honor in the work that their parents did and do. And so it's really important, and we really wanted to encourage to keep serving. We wanted to get families plugged into their communities, get the kids involved, and really give them a sense that they can be an everyday hero. And this is another really fun theme song of sorts, the Everyday Heroes. It's available on YouTube. It's also very catchy, as usual. And it's great for kids and adults to just feel like they can make a difference in the community around them. And then on this next slide, I'm going to pass it back over to Sabrina, and she's going to give you a really great case study of how all of these strategies and these resources were implemented into a specific program.
Great. Thank you so much, Tara. And I know we're a little short on time, so I'll go through this quickly, but this is something we really wanted to share. So like in all of our work at Sesame, we really want to make it as easy as possible for any organization to integrate our resources into the existing work they do already. So Operation Homefront, which I'm sure many of you know, is a great example. They're a national organization supporting military and veteran families through various services such as transitional housing, emergency financial assistance, caregiver programs, and school and holiday events for kids. Next, please. So after speaking with their national director there, we mutually agreed that the transitional housing program would be a great way to integrate our transitions resources easily into their work. This program allowed wounded service members and their families to live rent-free, while they transitioned back into civilian life. They provided counseling, financial assistance, and career development skills for the family, but they didn't really have any tools for the kids, and that's where we came in. We sent our resources, the activity book that Tara described, as well as a one-page guide on how to use the tools on our website, to the programs in the 3 cities they operate in, San Diego, Gaithersburg, and San Antonio. Next slide, please. The programs distributed the activity books and guides to each of the residents as they would move into their new home. They were also distributed at the annual Easter holiday event. What was really exciting about this for us was that not only were these Sesame Street resources easily integrated into their programs and also filled a need, but it also was a sustainable way to use these resources in the long term, since Operation Homefront is transitioning new families every 10 to 14 months. Next, please. And here we just wanted to share with you some of the quotes from the program directors as well as some of the adorable pictures from their Easter event. So please feel free to read those on your own. And also just wanted to share that even like last week, the San Antonio office just requested additional activity books to support the new families they're welcoming in the next few months. Next slide, please. So that's really all from us, and we just wanted to remind you that if you do work with transitioning and veteran families, we encourage you to sign up for the Adventure campaign. Here's the information here, sesamestreet.org/adventure. Next slide, please. And then, of course, all the resources we talked about today are available. They're all free, and they're at www.sesamestreet.org/veteran. And last slide, please. And finally, we do still have some of those printed activity books we talked about. They're all available for free, and they come 75 to a box. So please email us at veterans@sesame.org to order them today. And next, please. I think, that's also just more information of how to order the books and also to sign up for the Adventure campaign. I think that's all from us. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. I love that it was like even ingrained in the presentation, the way that Sesame teaches us from very young age up. It's like the reiteration and reminder. And so we had 3 slides with how to find the resources, which I know so many of you out there that are listening are like, where can we find this one? Where can we get that one? And it's like that message is ingrained. So thanks for the ABCs and for reminding us about how to really reach and access these amazing resources. And, you know, it takes me a minute to digest everything we've heard today, as it does, I'm sure, our audience. But I know we have some great questions that are starting to filter in. One thing in particular that, you know, kind of strikes me is that we definitely have so many resources out there for our military and veteran families. And, you know, this is just one glimpse at some of the great ones that are out there, and many of you may have more. One thing we want to make sure is that folks know that, you know, once you start looking at some of the unique challenges that are out there, this is the best way for us to kind of identify what are the resource gaps that continue to be out there. And so I know Sesame and the National Center and SAMHSA, we're all in this to make sure that we're filling those needs. And so excited to hear some of the questions that you may have as the audience, having sat through this with some of the challenges that you may be facing. So I think we're going to hand it over to our folks, Tara and the team there at the National Council, to help us get through some of your questions. And again, just a reminder for everyone who's on the call, if we can't get to your question today just because of timing, we're going to do everything we can to get some more of those links and resources posted that you need.
Well, thank you, Cicely. We do have quite a few questions that have come in. I wanted to start off with the first questions, which are actually for you about the report. The first question is, are the samples based on military families living on post?
So I believe that person's calling about or asking about the NSDA survey. So SAMHSA's NSDA survey actually doesn't capture those families. Those families are captured through DOD in their annual DOD health behavior surveys that would be provided for those active duty service members, reservists, and their families. But we can get you a link for where to find that information. That doesn't happen necessarily every single year that I know of, but we do have some of the resources for the latest links. So what you're really seeing in that NSDA survey is folks that would be living off post, off base, that are in their communities, and that's how they're reaching that sample size that you saw today. Thank you for the question.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question is for Greg. The next question is, which is more or is it the same traumatic experience when a mom is being deployed and the dad is the caregiver?
Oh, that's a great question, and I'm going to unpack it a little bit. First of all, being deployed by itself is not necessarily a traumatic experience. It's really a parental separation, and many factors may sort of support the family through that deployment so that it's not a traumatic experience. Certainly, all deployments are not traumatic, so we just need to be mindful of that trauma can occur, and we want to help prevent, if a trauma occurs, any negative response from and help support the family and the children. In terms of the issue of mom and dad, that's an interesting part too. As we certainly are aware, more mothers, more women are serving in deployment roles, and certainly more moms are serving in deployment roles. There's not a whole lot of research with looking at the case that you're presenting, Linda, where mom is deployed and dad is the caregiver, and how the family may adjust to that. So that's certainly a gap in our understanding as women serve more and more in deployment roles. I can say that anecdotally, I know that there are many who are very interested in understanding this dynamic of mom being deployed and her challenges, both deployment and reintegration back in the family. And I've spoken to many women in uniform who've had this experience and described some of the real challenges they face with reintegration, including sometimes a misunderstanding or some gender biases related to her role in the family. And so I think that we're just at the beginning of understanding this dynamic, and more work needs to be done to understand this particular issue.
Okay, great. Another question for you is, what recommendations are provided for continuity of care through life transitions?
PCS or separation. What recommendations are provided for continuity of care? Very, very good question and very important question. And I can just say that from our perspective, the community is a very important part of the equation that we're working from our perspective under SAMHSA's National Child Traumatic Stress Network initiative to help build community capacity. And when I say that, I mean that community agencies, that what we began with, and Cicely presented the map of all the state policy programs that the SMVF TA Center is working closely with throughout our country to build a network of informed programs and agencies, in addition to the federal government, state government, local county programs, nonprofits. There's certainly other programs coming online right now throughout our country, private organizations that are being built to support the behavioral health needs, the wellness needs, the resiliency of our veteran families who are transitioning to civilian life, and being able to provide training to providers and staff and agencies so that there's an understanding of the military experience, the transitions, the experiences that the family, the children may have had, understanding that the transition of civilian life is another but maybe extremely critical moment in this family's whole development, and we need to understand that transition to civilian life. So including community agencies in the becoming military-informed, veteran-informed, to be able to have resources for groups like we're doing here in Los Angeles. There's a LA Collaborative where from a local perspective, groups are gathering and communicating across agencies to be able to provide continuity of care through collaborative dialogue, referral, understanding, and so on. So being able to understand the needs of the families and children in your area and what are the resources. And finding ways to maintain this work, I think that's another really important issue, is how do we maintain this over time and continue to have dialogues exactly like we're doing today to remind each other what are the resources, what are the needs of the families right now, what are the needs in the future, and how do we continue this dialogue going forward. It's going to be a continued communication and discussion that we have as our society, taking care of our warriors and their families that also committed and sacrificed so much to serve our country.
Greg, this is Cicely. I think that's exactly, where I was going when that question came up. And, just again to add, when we're talking about, the continuity of care, that, we are our best advocates for our families. I mean, no one is going to have your back better than your own family. And I think that's part of what makes the military culture so unique, is that you are part of a large family. But when the transition occurs, oftentimes you may feel cut off from some of those resources that exist. And our efforts really are to make sure that the behavioral health community is aware of what they need to do, but also for families to know that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has some great resources that parents can help to educate themselves about these evidence-based practices. One of the slides that Greg had, mentioned about some of the practices that are actually adapted for military families, like trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, or FOCUS, which, Greg himself even helped to create, focused on this, population in particular. And one thing that we know is that if we can work with providers that understand and have been trained in these evidence-based practices, then if you're on session 6 with a provider within the DoD system, and then you transition to the community system, and you can take your knowledge of where you're at and the resources that they have, helped you along the way to understand and get to, then being able to pick up that care doesn't always require you to start from scratch when you go back out. And I think that's a big, huge issue when it comes to continuity of care and looking at helping families be advocates for themselves when they transition. That, coupled with the fact that folks had asked about a little bit more ways to kind of find those resources so that they could be more culturally competent providers. And one thing we want you to know, outside of the National Child Traumatic Stress Network site that's being resourced here, it's also some great partners that we have out in the field. Two that I'll just mention quickly: the Military Child Education Coalition. So if you have school-age children, I know some folks were asking about resources for a little bit older children. Some of their programming around student-to-student and other resources for older kids are really critical, and they're a great resource. Additionally, for the therapists themselves, and even community members, is Psych Armor, and that's PSYCH armor.org, which has 100% online free content that's been vetted through partners like VA and other federal agencies, as well as veteran service organizations. And then also our community provider toolkit page that the VA has put out. That community provider toolkit page has some really great critical resources. And one page in particular that is a one-stop shop for our military and veteran families as the VA, DoD, and HHS SAMHSA have put a number of our key military and veteran family-focused resources on one site. We, through an executive order, have been doing a lot of collaboration on addressing the issues of this population, and that site in particular will have a number of resources as well. So let's hand it back to you, Tara, for another question.
So the next question is for our Sesame Street team. There's a couple of questions. The first is, does Sesame Street have speakers to speak at small groups or at service providers?
Okay, this is Tara, and I'll take that one. We do occasionally go to speaking conferences. We sort of have a list of qualifications that we'd like to meet, so we can definitely chat about that and see who we're reaching and all of those things. And you can email me if you'd like. It's tara.forth, F-O-R-T-H, @sesame.org. And we can definitely set some time up to chat about what you're needing and see how we can accommodate with resources.
Okay, the next question is, has the Sesame Street Project examined ways to talk about and assist children in military families with sleep problems?
Sleep problems. You know, I'm not sure that we have addressed that at this time. But we can bring that up to our content team and see if we have any resources. And again, if you have any specific questions, you can email us or,
We do formative and impact and evaluation study for everything. So we do have a whole research team, so maybe they would know. They have worked on this project for over a decade. We still have our original director, but they would, if you could please email us that, we'll definitely, find out if we have done that or if we have any plans to do that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the last question of this group for Sesame Street is that it says, it was mentioned that Sesame Street program has been around for about 10 years. When was the transition materials launched?
Yeah, so Transitions actually formally launched this January of this year, but deployments, which was what we started with, was in 2006. And then in 2008, we also launched our changes and relocation and injury program, and then soon after that, we created the responsive website, which is SesameStreetForMilitaryFamilies.org, and then Transitions recently launched, like I said, earlier this year.
Okay. And do you guys have any materials that are for older children, ages 10, 12, 16, that may be exhibiting or expressing symptoms of PTSD?
No, we do not have. We don't age up very often with our content. We did have some resources around the electric company, which were for older kids, but those were mostly based around self-expression and feelings. PTSD is obviously a great need that we have. We are getting into trauma this year to see how we can address that, and I'm suspecting that will age up just a little bit, but maybe not quite to that age range.
Okay, so we have a question for all of the presenters. It says, as a school psychologist, do you have any ideas of how I can reach out to military families in the schools that I serve that may not be identified or supported? Any suggestions?
I don't know if this is actually the most appropriate way, but especially if it is through the school, if there is a school forum or a board or really a safe place that families can go and just talk about different things. Because I've realized, when we were talking a little bit about social media, and that just has been such, honestly, a blessing for us. One of the big challenges I think we have is really creating awareness that Sesame Street cares about military and veteran families, and we have these resources. So providers and families alike are really surprised when we tell them this. And we've been really active on social media just to really get the word out that these kind of resources exist. I don't know how that would really translate into really a school setting, but if there are, because social media is something that is so apparent now, if there are school kind of clubs or forums, I think that might be an opportunity to, even pose some questions or
you could look online. Again, this might not be the most efficient, but it could be a very personal way to get in touch with these families. Is to maybe research some community groups or some parents groups in your community and see, send a message there to see if anyone in your school district or at your school specifically is needing that support and maybe offer help that way.
This is Greg. I also wanted to recommend the Military Child Education Coalition, or MSEC, has some very good materials and programs for use in both military and civilian school settings. Their student-to-student program or parent-to-parent program are great peer support programs. I also wanted to mention both here in Southern California, LA Unified School District is actively asking about whether the military or veteran family has a military history, so trying to proactively sort of screen for, identify those families that would like additional services. So there are different efforts afoot within schools to support our military and veteran families and their children, and be happy if you'd like to reach out to provide some additional resources to you.
And this is Cicely. I would just add, too, that, it goes a long way to have visual aids. And oftentimes I've, gone in and volunteered at my own children's school around Veterans Day or Memorial Day to do in-services to share with the class about why we have these holidays and what do they mean and how do you identify and who is a military or a veteran family. And just sitting in one of the classes, I had 2 children once raise their hands that shared that they had a loved one, a stepfather or a mom deployed, and the teacher had no idea. And so it's really important sometimes, like this individual who's asking, how do we find those families if you're not in a school system that asks that question? And sometimes it comes down to you adding it to your own psychosocial assessment tool, or making sure that when there is an opportunity, like the month of November and National Military Family Month or Month of the Military Child that comes up later in April, that you actually put some sort of visual out there so that those families can recognize that. And it's really critical to just, know that even one person can make that extra effort, and then you pick up on it and others will as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of the free resources that are available here on the slide. And then we wanted to just thank you for attending today's webinar. The SAMHSA Service Members, Veterans, and Their Families Technical Assistance Center presents resources, innovations, and partnerships supporting the wellness of military children and their families. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email by the end of the week with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of the National Council, Policy Research Associates, and SAMHSA's SMVF TA Center, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of your day.